Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the C-Man, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down. I tell you, this is new for the channel. I was thinking about this while I was talking about the last movie. I don't think I've really ever talked about any Peacock content, and I've got like 3 different pieces of Peacock content to talk to you guys about. We just talked about their newest slasher movie, Sick, which is streaming only, and you can get it right on Peacock now. You can check out those thoughts right up there. But now we shift our attention to television. And no, I'm not going to Bel Air, which might be the one thing that Peacock has had that really hooked people. But I'll be interested to see how Season 2 does, considering anything involving Will Smith post-slap seems to be a question mark. And 2, while it did quite well, it was smack dab in the middle of the Olympics and the Super Bowl, so I think a lot of people just were on Peacock already, and it was an easy one to roll into. So it'll be interesting to see how well Season 2 of Bel Air does. But outside of that, I don't know if Peacock has had like the show or the movie or the entity that just hooks you and goes, I have to get this service and go. Well, I think they may have found that. Rian Johnson, who's a little hot right now, I don't know, maybe you've heard of a small movie, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. That guy has created a television show with star Natasha Leyonne that is like the happiest medium between procedural television and narrative-driven dramas. Like, he's found this really interesting middle ground that just has me hooked 4 episodes in. What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair? Take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-free, into the first 4 episodes of Poker Face. And no, I'm not talking about the Lady Gaga song. I am talking about this show that stars Natasha Leyonne, and as I mentioned, comes to us from series creator Rian Johnson. And if you guys follow this channel, you know I'm a huge Rian Johnson fan because the dude thinks outside the box in everything he does, man. Like, he develops and creates movies or things that you think you've seen before, and then when you watch it, you go, I've never seen that version of that thing. And it's the thing I love the most about Johnson. Like, his brain is just so creative and interesting, and I'm always fascinated to see where he's going to take a story. And the idea of him working in television, something I was super excited about, especially when you hear the setup of, our main character, Charlie, who's played by Natasha Leyonne, kind of is into solving murders in this show. And coming off of like all the Knives Out stuff, you'd be like, ooh, man, I write murder mystery stuff. But it's not quite that at all. It's more, like I said, kind of structurally very procedural law crime television, right? There's a murder every week. Every week, Natasha Leyonne is involved in investigating, and every week, Natasha Leyonne figures that murder out. But the thing that I dig about the show, well, there's several things that I dig about the show, but one of the early things is that it isn't a mystery for us, and the structure to the show is really cool. We'll dive in and see our murder take place, and then we'll back out and relive the day from Natasha Leyonne's perspective and see where, during, before, or after the murder she enters the story, and how it carries from there. So just from like a setup standpoint, really fascinating stuff. And like I said, kind of gives you this procedural feel. But Natasha Leyonne's character in the first episode is presented with a really, fascinating storyline. And because she decides to go down that path, it creates a really interesting personal storyline for her that, kind of has her turning into a bit of a ghost, so to speak. She's kind of bouncing around the country, laying low, trying to avoid certain people. And while she's doing this, she constantly stumbles into these different murders. And the quirk, which is one of the other things that I love about Johnson, is having quirks for different characters. The quirk with Charlie is that she's a human lie detector, which is kind of cool because if you think about Knives Out, we had Ana de Armas's character, someone who couldn't tell a lie because she would puke, just couldn't stop. I lie, I vomit. Well, here, Charlie can just look at you. And if you lie, she'll call bullshit. And if you don't, she'll say it's the truth. And it's a fascinating little thing, and how that quirk constantly pulls her into these situations, even when she's trying to leave. The other thing about her character is she kind of makes fun of a friend of hers for a specific character trait that her character kind of has taken on throughout the course of the series so far. And it it kind of forces her to have to dive into these things. And each murder is set up really well in the cold open. And then as Charlie comes in, it gives really interesting things for Natasha Leyonne. And I think from a production and a writing room standpoint, I think Johnson has got a great writer's room with him. They definitely are a group of people who understand what he's going for, where he's coming from. Same thing with the directors he's taking. And that's always the fun thing for me, is when you have a really legit creative doing something like this, where you're producing and kind of like running the show more than being the physical director or writer at all times. Johnson does direct and write a few of the episodes. But I think the team that he's crafted around him is a team that gets what he's going for, and together they're producing stuff that I couldn't stop watching. And the thing that I love is that because it's a little bit procedural, every episode gets closed out. So if you're, say you got to be up early, like I was on Saturday, I had to be up at like 5 o'clock. I watched the first 2 episodes and was like, I want to keep watching. But it was really easy to go, you know what? They're on something in the background, pass out, because I wasn't left in a cliffhanger, even though all of Charlie's story is kind of a cliffhanger. So all of that stuff I think the show really has working for it. And then front and center, Natasha Leyonne is phenomenal. I mean, I've been watching this woman since American Pie, and to see where she's come and the places that she's gone and the things she's done, I just think she's another one who's always fascinating on camera, and this role just feels like it was curated for her. And maybe Johnson did that, but she's perfect, man. From her raspy delivery to the way that she perceives things, to the way that she goes about investigating and figuring things out, and the way that she'll, get stuck on like a word and can't think of it. This happened to me the other day where I was like, what's the word? And it's something that happens to Leyonne's character a lot. And all the little quirks and things that Johnson gives her from a character standpoint, I really think are fascinating. And she brings a really interesting perspective to all those things. And that kind of leads me into the thing that I also love about this show, is that Natasha Leyonne is the only reoccurring character. Every episode, because she's on the move, involves a different cast, and it involves a different celebrity cast, which is something that I adore, because Rian Johnson is really good at assembling a crazy amount of talent and being able to represent them on screen really, really well. And what's nice is each episode gives us a different collection of people for him to play with. So what we're going to do now is shift in, because Peacock dropped the first 4 episodes all at once. I'm going to rank the episodes and then briefly talk about the things that kind of popped for me in each episode. So I'm going to start with episode 2, actually. Episode 2, which is titled The Night Shift, brings us to a little middle of nowhere stretch of highway where you have like a Subway, a convenience store, and a gas station / service station. And Leyonne's character gets pulled into that world because her car is having trouble, so she kind of hanging around or whatever. And she kind of interacts with people and ends up befriending, or at least liking, typically the murder suspect. So with the night shift, we tee up the murder at the top, and then Leyonne comes into town. You see her interact with the person who gets killed. And because we've seen the front half, it's fun to watch Leyonne kind of figure everything out. And this was an episode that I wasn't necessarily expecting to be my favorite out of the 4, just from the cast list alone, because it wasn't a lot of big names you might know outside of Hong Chow and John Ratzenberger. And Ratzenberger is really more of a kind of like cameo appearance, and the same goes for Chow. Your supporting leads in this are Megan Surrey, Colton Ryan, and Brandon Michael Hall, all people that I'm very unfamiliar with. And yet the story that Johnson crafts for this one in particular is just super engaging because of those actors. The young actors in this one, Colton Ryan, Megan Surrey, and Brandon Michael Hall, all do an excellent job. And I was fascinated with everything that was going on with their characters, how they were playing off each other, and like I said, how Leyonne figures these things out. And I thoroughly enjoyed Leyonne's interactions with everybody here, but specifically Chow and Michael Hall. I think she bounces off them really well, and they're 2 people that she kind of befriends a little bit. Hall making her a sandwich. It's one of his quirks, is that he comes up with really interesting ways to deliver these Subway subs to kind of enhance them. And then Chow is someone that she kind of bumps into that kind of gives her some tips at a diner. And just watching the way she plays off of all those people and how that story plays out ended up being my favorite of the 4. My second favorite of the 4 is actually our first episode, and it was really close. Like, this episode is so well executed. Titled Dead Man's Hand. has one of the best supporting casts thus far, where your real leads after Leyonne are Adrian Brody, who plays Sterling Frost Jr., who runs this casino that Charlie works at, and Benjamin Bratt, who plays Cliff Legrand, who is Brody's like right-hand man for everything that's going on. And Brody's a bit of, it's like his dad's hotel, and he's letting him run it, so he's a little bit of a, just kind of like a, I can't think of the word. See, this is the thing that happens to Leyonne in the show, but he's immature. He thinks he knows things, but he doesn't really know things. And this is an episode where, from his perspective, he's trying to do something to kind of stick it to his dad. And the way that this world opens up and is introduced to us is really fascinating. It's the first episode where you kind of see what this structure is and how you play it and come into it. It's all new and fresh and fascinating, and it's the perfect hook episode. Like, you watch this episode, it tees up Charlie's story perfectly. You know the players that will come back in and out of the series as you move forward, and kind of gets you running in like how fascinating a character Charlie is. While I think Brody and Bratt provide really good assists, Brody in particular, he's really the main driving force this whole episode. But like I said, being the first one and watching how Leyonne navigates this stuff was just a lot of fun. And I think the storyline was clever, like how it pulls Brody in, how it pulls Leyonne in, and the things that are going on specifically in the casino. We're all really, really thoroughly engaging. And like I said, I think it's a fantastic ep, and it is my second favorite of the four. Coming in at my third favorite, we go to episode 3, which is titled The Stall, and features Lil Rel Howery as Taffy Boyle, who has this, down in Texas, like a barbecue pit place, and his brother George Boyle, who's played by Larry Brown, is the pit master. He's the guy who does all the cooking, and his right hand woman, so to speak, or Lil Rel's number 2 at the restaurant, is his wife, played by Danielle McDonald, Mandy Boyle. So George and Mandy are married. Taffy kind of runs everything, and everything's going really well for them when this episode opens. And the open to this episode was fascinating. Like, I didn't know what was going on, because like it kind of functioned a little bit different than the first two, and you're sitting there going, where are we going right now? And that's one of the fun things, where after the cold open happens and Leyonne enters the picture, you kind of get the pieces that you're missing from the cold open that make all sense. And that was one for me where I thought the cold open going into the story was one of the best executed. And honestly, I really enjoyed Lil Rel Howery in this one, because I find Lil Rel typically to be quite enjoyable. And he's usually playing a character that you like. He's a super likable human being. And he is a humongous asshole in this episode, and he really crushes it. I think he does a good job. And because he's someone who I think is, more good-natured in a lot of his roles, it allows him to kind of bring a little bit more depth to Taffy than someone who's just traditionally an a-hole on screen. So I really liked what Lil Rel got, because it was something different. I thought Larry Brown did an excellent job playing his brother and bouncing off him, and how he interacts specifically with Leyonne was something that I loved, as she kind of doesn't have the money to pay for something, so she kind of starts working for Larry, and how she picks up on the barbecue and the things that make the barbecue interesting and tasty and different, and how that plays into the murder and how she solves it. It was just excellent. Like, just one of them, like, sit back, you have a good time start to finish. And while I don't have it in the 1 or 2 spot, I really think it is completely on par with the first 2 episodes. Like, the first 3 episodes of this show, absolutely spectacular. Now, the 4th episode, titled Rest in Metal, is my least favorite of the 4. But it's still a really good one, and it's because, again, of really solid supporting cast members. Specifically in this one, Nicholas Cirillo, who plays this character, Gavin. And this is the first episode that kind of shakes things up, where the cold open doesn't lead right to a murder. So right away, I was kind of like, all right, something was different here. How is this going to go about? And it's because Johnson and his team want you to spend a little bit more time with Chloe Savini's band. She plays a character named Ruby Ruin. And, Gavin is part of that, as is Chuck Cooper, who plays Deuteronomy, their roadie, John Darnielle, who plays Al, and G.K. Uma, who plays Eski. So you kind of ride with them a bunch, and I'm glad that you get to spend more time with them than just a quick cold open, because the characters are really likable or hateable, right? Like that's the thing I like about this episode is you have some really hateable characters. You got some characters that you're like, I want to feel bad for you, but like, nah. And then you have, specifically, like I enjoy Deuteronomy, but Gavin is a character that you're just naturally drawn to. And ironically, that means that Charlie is naturally drawn to Gavin, even though it takes a little working to get there. But their relationship is really the thing that drives this episode for me. And how she goes about figuring this one out is a lot of fun. Chloe Sevigny is okay here. I didn't really buy her as a heavy metal rocker. And I think that's the thing about the episode that just doesn't quite hit where, like, it leaves it just out of the same level as the first three. But does all the things that Johnson and his team are looking to do. It keeps it interesting. Like I said, the delivery on this one is a little bit of a change-up, which going into episode 5 this week makes me go, ooh, what are we going to get? Like, are we going to get a cold open murder? Are we going to get a little bit longer piece of storytelling? And the other thing about this episode is it does kind of tie back in maybe the most to Charlie's overall story. Why Charlie's overall story has blips in each episode. This one kind of has more repercussion-y type things and sets up a really interesting start for episode 5. So while not my favorite, again, an episode I thoroughly enjoyed. And like I said, I think it's teeing really good things up as we start to move into a weekly release. From what I understand, this is a 10-episode run. We've seen 4, and over the next 6 weeks, we'll get the remaining episodes. So I'm really digging Poker Face. And like I said, from my episode rankings, I go 2, 1, 3, 4. All of them, I think, are rock solid. You're getting really nice supporting cast performances and a different cast in every episode. And Natasha Leyonne is just electric at all times, man. Like, she is, we were talking about how Skarsgård and Goth are people you just can't take your eyes off. You're always interested in what they're doing. And Leyonne is the same way, man. Like, whether she's just leaning on a tree or getting up in your face, like, everything she's doing is fascinating, and I love her delivery, and I can't wait to see where this show goes as it continues to unfold the rest of the season. But for the old C-Man, let's get the C-Maniacs up. While I gave you my overall rankings, what I'm going to say for the show is I'm not going to rank each episode, but for the first 4, I'm going to give like really rock solid things. I think Johnson has a great creative setup. I think he's got a really interesting concept to play with as far as like how the episodes are structured, and the story for Charlie is really, really strong and interesting where you want to go on all these different rides with her. And while it has a little bit more of a procedural vibe to it, some of the different and unique things that Johnson is bringing to the table and the way in which he's telling Charlie's narrative story, it's kind of like that happy medium between the two. Like, my mom is a hardcore procedural fan. I grew up watching procedurals with my mom, but I kind of started to gravitate over to HBO and Showtime and more narrative-driven individual stories rather than all these things where it's like, oh man, it's the third guy every time. And that's the fun thing. While there are procedural elements here, you don't have to worry about figuring out who it is. Oh, it's the first guy you meet or the third guy you meet. You find out who the murderer is right at the top, and then you bring Charlie in and let everything kind of play out and watch how she figures it out. And that's the fun of the show. And for me, I'm going to go 4 out of 5. I think every single one of these episodes is rock solid. I'd put them all pretty much on the same level. I'd maybe make, 2 like a 4 or 5 and maybe 4 3 5. So overall, it'll all even out to about 4 through the first 4 episodes. But that's kind of where I land, man. Like, this is a really, really, like, for me, the put the hooks in you and make you go get Peacock, because if you're a fan of Rian Johnson, he's continuing to do great stuff here. And Natasha Leyonne, I mean, I'm just sitting here going, how many times could Natasha Leyonne could have come into Rian Johnson's purview or landed somewhere where we could have gotten her earlier, because it feels like she was born to be in a Rian Johnson production. So I think you've got a phenomenal lead with her. I think the supporting cast every week is really excellent, and Johnson and his writing team are coming up with really interesting stories and ways to present the murders and then investigate the murders. And for me, it is a slam dunk must watch, and it's been a long time, I think, since Peacock has had anything that was a must watch. And I think, like I said, Bel Air was maybe there, but this is really like the one where I'm telling my friends actively, like, yo, if you don't have Peacock here, I'll throw you my creds, man. Like, you gotta watch this show. So those are all my thoughts. Now I want to know what you guys are thinking. If you are Peacock subscribers, have you started Poker Face? If you have, how many episodes have you watched? If you've watched all 4, let me know what your favorites are. Give them a little ranking of your own, but then, keep it spoiler free and let me know if you like the idea of the show, what you think of Leyonne, what you think of the casts. And if you haven't checked this out and you're just listening to the old Seaman, wax poetic on how great Poker Face is this something that now you're intrigued by or was maybe already on your to-do list? What about this show is something that interests you and is going to make you watch it, or maybe get Peacock if you don't have it already? Anything that you guys have, good, bad, indifferent, on Poker Face, episodes 1 through 4. Put it down below in the comment section. I look forward to talking to you all down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you want to be here supporting the old Seaman every week as we talk about The Last of Us, and now switch over to a weekly discussion, an episode-by-episode discussion for Poker Face, maybe you just want to show a little love and support this old wacky guy. Just dig when I'm talking movies and TV. Well, why don't you come join C-Maniac Nation then? It's the easiest way to show a little love and support, and you can do it simply by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts, and until next time, for the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the Seaman. I'm signing off. Peace! Oh, you guys are still here. You snuck up on me. You must be looking for more of this guy. Well, I got 2 video options for you, man. Right up here and right over here. And if you want all those Seaman goodies, well, hey, come join the squad right on over there, and I'll catch you on the next one.